Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Every Other Wednesday, where our mission is to help you create more compassionate, innovative, and inspiring workplace cultures that drive outrageous business results. I'm Jeff Tobe, the disruptor of the group, as you guys call me, and I've had the privilege to serve as your cat herder during the next 45 minutes together today. Before I introduce my fellow Culture Club partners, and no, Boy George is not one of them, as someone suggested via email after the last time we said that. I want to ask for your participation as a viewer. Would you put a number, 1, 2, or 3, in the chat box to indicate how many shows you've joined us for? Yes, this is only our 3rd show, so it's got to be 1, 2, or 3, either live or listening to the recording. So just 1, 2, or 3 in the chat box. We'll get back to that in a minute. And let me introduce my fellow co-hosts on this all things culture circus. First, from Jacksonville, Florida, where we ask, are you ready to hit the beach in a pandemic? Jacksonville Mayor Lenny Curry and Florida Governor Ron DeSantis says it's safe. So welcome the contented cows guy, Richard Hadden. Say hello, Richard.
Thank you. Good to be here. I'm the only person in my family who's not a redhead. We don't go to the beach anyway, so.
Got it. And by the way, I need to mention that today, thanks to Michael Kerr, he advised us that it's Be a Dork Day. Guys, we forgot to tell Richard not to dress up. I don't know, but anyway, let me keep going before I get in trouble. From somewhere near Calgary, Alberta, where the Hibernation Channel is still the most popular cable channel, the workplace engineer, Michael Kerr.
Thank you, Jeff. It's great to be here. The workplace energizer, I believe.
Energizer, right. Sorry.
You were just practicing being a dork. And look, I want to, you took that shot at Richard, but I want to point out, Richard, in my heart, in my mind, is a dork every day.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, and I also want to point out, just in case that I don't know if I'm looking shaggy or not, but this is officially 112 days without a haircut.
Good for you, and proud of it too. Never mind, I'm going to switch the dork designation, I think. You keep growing that hair. Anyway, and last but not least, from Oakville, Ontario, our other Canadian, where the days of the pandemic and quarantining might blur together, but they mark their passing by the length of Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's hair. Our strengths guy, Sunjay, Nath.
I'm thrilled to be here, and I'm happy you're making fun of the Prime Minister rather than me. Given the introduction you gave to the first two, I was bracing myself, but I got off pretty easy. So we got a good culture here. That's all I got to say.
You did. Richard, you're following the results of any of our polls today. What were people saying?
On the question about how many they have joined us for, we got a 1, 3, 2, 2, 2, 2, 2, 1, 2, including this one, 1, 1. 1, 1, 1, 2, 2, 2, 3, 1.
Right, you don't have to go through them all.
All right. So what I'm hearing is anyone who typed in more than 1 clearly hasn't learned from their mistakes, or they said, "Good Lord, it's got to be better this time," and they're giving us a chance of redemption. So we thank you and we appreciate your.
Thank you. We do appreciate everyone being here.
Good to have everyone back, and good to have the newcomers.
If this is your first one, then welcome, and we hope that in 3 more shows you'll be able to enter the numbers 3 or 4. I wanted to mention, guys, before we go any further, that everyone should stay tuned to the end of the show, where we have a huge announcement. Remember, I'm in the States, that you're not going to want to miss. It's just beautiful. Anyway, I'll keep going. No politics, all right? So let's get on with the reason that you're here and jump right in. We're going to jump into our lightning round, guys. And remember, today's topic is, why do leaders, managers mostly suck at communication skills? So our lightning round, our first question is, what would you say are the reasons leaders suck at communication skills? And we're going to keep going till we've kind of exhausted the reasons. So remember, it's a lightning round. Richard?
I think it's because they don't have the same communication needs that some of the people they communicate with have.
Sunjay?
Different perspective. They assume that people look at it from their lens and not from someone else's lens.
Michael?
They don't get the training. They don't invest in the training. They don't prioritize it as a training need.
Yeah, and I have to add that I think it's a lack of preparation sometimes too. I think it's, it's kind of responding or reacting to something versus taking time to prepare. What else, guys? I'll open it up.
Well, I'll jump on what you said, Jeff. I think they don't make it a priority. And I know what it's like. I've been in senior management positions before, and life takes over, and you get busy doing the stuff, and communication becomes the afterthought. And I think to be an effective leader, you have to embrace the notion that your entire job really is communication, and you have to upload the communication and not treat it as an afterthought. It's got to be central to everything you do. It is the job of being a leader.
And I think what you're
saying,
saying,
piggyback on what Robert said here in the chat. He said, I think too often it's the belief of one and done, and so there's a lack of consistency. It's if you have kids, you tell them to pick up their jacket once, it's not going to work. And if you get it and you create the communication and the culture, eventually it becomes understood, and they, in theory, automatically pick up their jacket.
I think communication almost always has to be very intentional. And I know if I use myself as an example, sometimes I just talk without, as you said, Mike, without preparing, without thinking about it. And I think when it is intentional and deliberate, and we know what the objective is, the communication is going to be more effective.
Yeah, I also think they suck at communication skills just because they're often intimidating. They don't look at what they're saying or how they're saying it from the recipient's perspective as well.
Well, and on that note, Jeff, too, a big one that I hope we'll maybe explore even further throughout this is just the belief, and I see this in so many organizations, right, where you move up into a senior leadership position, and all of a sudden you start talking like a non-human. You start saying things like, at the end of the day, we're going to parameterize our paradigm shift in order to reach blah, 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 and it becomes this deja vu, which Richard should appreciate.
Watch it, yeah.
Deja vu, where you have this feeling that you've heard this bullshit before, and they're not communicating from an authentic place. They're not just speaking with plain, simple language. They're using that bureaucratic speak because they have this belief, this mindset, this persona that they almost adapt, that they feel like, now I have to be a professional. I have to speak like a senior manager.
There's also a hard skill, soft skills.
I think we have to keep in mind kind of what communication sounds like, and communication does evolve. And if we're like, did you ever listen to one of the things on radio or TV that's from the 40s, and it's like their voices even sound different, And so communication evolves. And so I'm not saying we need to be like all hip and jive and everything, and not be ourselves in the way we communicate. But I also think that 2020 communication is going to sound even different, even from 2010 communication. And so we just need to make sure we're kind of keeping up with the time so that people get the meaning that we have.
There's also a big gap, I think, between hard skills and soft skills and the perception people have around them. So communication being a soft skill, it just often is deemed to be less important until you actually get into the role and you're like, holy smokes, this is really important. And I apologize in advance, but I have a degree in mathematical engineering. And one of the things that we were forced to take a communications course. And so as you can imagine, engineers all rolling their eyes going, oh, this is garbage, this is useless. And what was amazing to me is we had some guest speakers throughout the semester come in that were practicing engineers. And it surprised me how many of them said this was the most important course they took. So we emphasize these hard skills, and you can, find the standard deviation and figure out the stresses on the trusses and Excel and Access and do your database management. And we have such an emphasis on that. But it's a learn on the job too often. And so if we kind of emphasize it earlier, I think it would become more ingrained, and some of those skills and those processes would become more part of the culture.
Okay, excellent. Let's move on. Peter Barron Stark Companies is a leading management consulting firm. They did a study in their employee opinion benchmark surveys last year on the best ways for leaders to communicate. In this sealed envelope, well, it was sealed, except I ripped the corner. Sorry, you weren't supposed to see that. In this sealed envelope, I have all the tips they shared on separate pieces of paper. I'm going to select one randomly, and whoever wants to, just comment on it, just jump in with your feelings, either positively or negatively. Fair enough?
Go ahead. Actually, before you do that, Jeff, I'm wondering, before you do that, we've got some great comments that came in for the previous question. Can I just cover those real quickly?
No. So let's go. No, I'm kidding. Of course.
Yeah. So Steve says, in answer to your question, it's because they're not hired based on their communication skills. You're right. How often do we, when we're interviewing, do we consider part of that?
Let me add to that, Richard. Hold on. Yeah. I don't think you're promoted because of your communication skills either.
Exactly.
So you're promoted into this position of being a manager suddenly, and nobody's ever taught you, how to communicate. So
yeah, right on. That was Steve who said that. I had that at my top 4 list of why leaders suck. It's so important.
This comes from a Steve whom I happen to know, and he is a very wise man and is known for saying things that are very good. So
Richard's sucking up to his client.
Yeah. Right there. So the next one is from Carol, and it says lack of awareness of the impact of their written, verbal, and body language communications. Wow, that really, talking about body language, we haven't even really gotten into that, but that's such an important part. And then Jack says, how about, I love the way Jack writes. Jack says, how about, hey, I'm a good communicator, got me this far. I just say what I meant sincerely and with no clue about how well and clearly they speak, and without addressing that speaking is only one side of communication. And then finally, Bob has said, how do you interview a candidate for any position, leadership or not, without judging their communication skills? An interview is a communication.
Yeah.
You're absolutely right. And yet I'll bet you a lot of people, when they're marking on the interview form, there's nothing about communication in many cases. Certainly not always the case, but
I would also mention
it's not that. And so when they look at it on paper, rather than going with the entire interview and everything that they've experienced, and communication being part of it.
Well, I would also guess that Bob doesn't work for the Canadian or the American government, because they don't hire our communication skills, I'm sure. But anyway, that's a whole other stuff. Okay, It was a sealed envelope. Now it's open. And here's the first one, reaction. Remember that these are tips that they shared on the best ways for leaders to communicate. Ready? Listen with your ears, your eyes, and your heart.
Listen with your heart.
Kumbaya, everyone. Let's do it.
Yeah, but okay, go ahead, because I have a comment about that in support of that, but go ahead.
All right, I'll start. I think that really what they're saying is that, there's a difference between hearing and listening, right? Like, we can hear what people are saying, but a big part of communication is truly listening. I talk about communication skills in listening between the lines, right? And I think that's what it means about listening with your heart and your eyes as well. It goes back to body language, Richard. We need to watch how people are communicating with us as well.
Yeah, and there's two things. I think listening has a lot to do with what they're saying, but also you have to listen for what they're not saying. And in order to do that, you've got to listen with your heart and with your eyes. The other thing, so some of you know that I practice Spanish and learn Spanish with a friend of mine in Spain every week. And I have trouble with a lot of Spanish words. He has trouble with only a few English words. And one of them is the difference between listen and hear. And I not constantly, but I have repeatedly had to explain to him, listening is an active verb, hear is passive. You can stand something and hear it without listening. So I always try to remember, hearing just happens to you, but listening you got to do.
I love that, Richard. That's a great way of looking at it. And of course, I was mocking the listen from the heart thing, but of course I believe that. I talk about that all the time. It's so important. And one of the reasons we know listening is so important is when you survey employees, and when I talk to employees about their thoughts on great bosses, great leaders that they've had throughout their careers, nobody ever, or very rarely, says, I loved Susan, I loved Bob because they were great talkers. What do they always say? My best boss listened, was a great listener. And the second comment I want to make on this is just to broaden it out to culture, because we're putting this in the context of culture as well, too. The biggest hot button topic that engages people when I'm writing or speaking is the whole idea of two-way conversation in organizations, and employees not feeling like they have a collective voice, that they aren't being heard. So I think we have to talk about that as well, not just at the individual leader level, but is your company, is your organization proactively doing things to make sure you are doing two-way communication and making sure your employees really have a voice? You have to give them a seat at the table.
I think the big difference between hearing and listening is parallel with learning. So there is learning where you just memorize and regurgitate for the test, and then there's learning when you actually internalize and you can actually apply it. And so I think that's the main difference between listening and hearing. So when you're truly listening to someone, you're able to internalize that and apply it, and it comes out later, and not in a formula of, oh, the checkbox says I'm supposed to ask, how was your kid's soccer game? How was your kid's soccer game? And it's not this robotic process of a checklist, but it's just an ingrained, deep human-to-human connection.
Great. And I will remind you guys, we are still in the lightning round, right? So that means quick answers. All right. All right, next one, I'm reaching in and I'm pulling out another way that best ways for leaders to communicate. Don't underestimate the value of casual conversation.
I've always said that when you go to a conference, the real learning doesn't go on in the sessions. It goes on while you're standing in line for the buffet, or when you're having a coffee after the fact. So I'm a huge believer of the casual conversations is where you really get the true connections.
Yeah. That's where you build trust, right? I've always said, if you want to build a rocking great trust-filled culture, have more conversations and less meetings, and more genuine, real conversations. In fact, there's a study I've got somewhere in my notes that I talk about in my online culture course, where they talk about how if a leader just has every 2 weeks, just a casual 10-minute conversation with an employee, the numbers in terms of engagement, in terms of trust in that leader go through the roof.
But that's hard to do if the organization is huge. I mean, how do you suggest that?
Well, and how do you do that in a work from home setting as well? You know, it's hard enough apparently to just drop by the office and have a casual conversation. But when you have to make a Zoom appointment to do that, that puts another obstacle, another challenge here. One thing I was going to say before, in some military cultures, there's a concept, it's called sitting on the footlocker. And the idea is that the officer just from time to time just go and hang out with the men and women in uniform and just sit on the footlocker. And there's a famous speech that was given by a U.S. Army general. He said, just sit on the footlocker. You don't have to tell them they're doing a great job. Just sit on the footlocker and they'll know that you know that they're working like hell to make you look good.
I love that. I love that. You know, sometimes you get that radio voice, Richard. I like that.
I've been told I have a face for radio, yes.
Perfect. All right. Another reason is upside down. There's always more than one right answer to every challenge.
Absolutely.
I can start with that one. I think that's right up my alley with coloring outside the lines. You know, I think historically every innovation, every creative company has started because somebody dared to look for the second right answer. And I think effective leaders right now, and let's relate this back to culture, I think the whole thing right now is about being more creative at the way they look at what the situation, they look at their culture, kind of re-examine what they do. So if we accept that there's more than one right answer, we're not always saying, but I've seen this 1,000 times before, I know exactly what to do.
Yeah, and part of it too is as a leader, that means you have to have the mindset of being the person who doesn't always have the answers. In fact, you may rarely have the answers, and it's about creating that culture where I'm a senior leader, but I don't have the answers. We collectively have the answers, and drawing those answers and those ideas out takes good communication.
Guys, we've got some really good comments in the chat. And it's related to this. Can I bring up a couple of them? Of course I can. Thank you. So Wayne says, so what tells you that the listening manager has heard you, the employee? That's a great question. I've got some ideas, but I know you guys do too.
Will you repeat it again?
Yeah, what tells you that the person you're talking to is listening? So if I'm the employee and I want my manager to listen, what indicators do I have? What clues, what signs do I have that that manager is actually listening to me?
I'll jump in because I think one of the things that I teach, and I think it's so important for managers and leaders, is not only to ask the right questions, but to ask some specific questions. One of the things it would be a what effect question. See, right, when we hear our employees complain or anything else, we want to fix things and move on. Instead, I suggest we ask a what effect question. What effect is that going to have on the project? What effect will that have on morale? What effect will that have on your family? Something that takes it a step deeper, just so that the people say, you know what, they're really listening to me.
Yeah, there something just as simple as making eye contact, you know, because if you're trying to multitask and you're listening, you're hearing, and you're working on your computer, and you're also, you know, if you're in a Zoom setting, if you're looking at two other things going on, just to make that eye contact, and that eye contact may mean camera contact, so that the person really knows that you're taking in what they're saying.
Well, and Richard, on that note too, what I always tell people to do is, for goodness sakes, get away from your computer screen. Like, don't sit behind your desk and be doing this every 2 minutes.
Yeah.
Put this physically out of your way. Like,
Yeah.
show people that you are putting it on the other side of the room.
Yeah.
So you're totally present. And I love what my friend Lorraine said, follow up with a note afterwards. That's yet another effective way to
Yeah.
show, hey, you really heard what you were saying to me.
Yeah.
Just a little follow-up note to say, hey, I enjoyed our conversation, and I'm going to think about what you said.
If I can jump in, I would say I love all that stuff too. Yeah, we're looking for the physical feedback and what have you. But I also think it's a big responsibility of the person giving the message to articulate the message in a way, not from our standpoint, but from the listener's standpoint. So for example, if I know my manager is all about the bottom line and it's always a money thing, and I want to address a culture issue, I'm not going to address it from the culture issue of, hey, it's warm and fuzzy, people are happier, because I'm not effectively communicating with him or her. So what I wanted to be able to do is pose it in a way that what's important to me, but within their values. So kind of going, hey, by doing this, guess what? Job satisfaction increases, turnover lowers, and the bottom line increases. So sometimes I have to take a few extra steps to make that link to communicate to the person in their value set.
We're
Okay.
getting some, yeah, we're getting some really good, I know this is lightning round, Jeff, but we're getting some really good,
keep going if you.
yeah, we're getting some really good input from our friends in the audience. And someone said, just because you plan a time for an online conversation does not devalue the conversation. Wow, absolutely true. So I don't know if I indicated that I thought it was, because I certainly don't believe that. I think what I was saying was that in today's online conversation world, it doesn't seem as spontaneous. It doesn't seem as natural. And I think we're still getting good at that. We're still getting used to being able to have those conversations. And so what I've recommended is, by all means, especially now when many people are working remotely, and maybe they will for the foreseeable future, we gotta schedule those online conversations. And that also gives us the opportunity maybe to be prepared with some things that are going to be helpful for the person that we're communicating with.
Any other comments?
Yeah, let's see. Oh, from them or from our...
No, from them.
Yeah. Everybody likes what Mike is saying. Several people have said, I agree with Mike. I like that, Mike. More conversations, less meetings. A few select one-on-ones add long-term value.
We've got some very smart people, obviously, joining.
Yeah. Let's keep
They
going.
don't know you very well, Mike. I think that's the concern.
Oh, you mean the audience? You mean the audience?
Yeah.
Yes, we're very smart audience members. Hey, I want to jump on just my favorite quote, because Sunjay reminded me of this when it comes to communication. George Bernard Shaw: the single biggest problem with communication is the illusion that it has taken place.
I love that. All right, one more, right? One more
Okay,
from the
good.
envelope, and then we'll move on.
Yeah.
Last reason is encourage input from employees. Well, right? That's what an effective leader does. What do you think? How do we do that?
Well, yeah. I mean, I think that's clearly a no-brainer to encourage it. But then the question is, and it's kind of a complex issue, encouraging it does not necessarily mean that we are going to respond in the way you want us to respond every time. But it also means that if we encourage it, we got to be prepared to let people know that we did hear what they say. And if our actions do not turn into what they want, we need to be prepared to explain the reason for that.
Yeah, right on, Richard.
That's what,
One of the most demoralizing things, I think, is being continually asked for ideas, or working in a place where you have those suggestion boxes, which suggests to me you haven't built a certain level of trust and openness in your organization. But having those suggestion boxes where people keep putting in suggestions, and you start to think there's a paper shredder on the other side of the suggestion box, because you never hear back from anybody. And it sounds like your ideas are going into a black hole. So one of the simplest things we can do, of course this is ridiculously important, is just ask the dirt simple question on an ongoing basis. Hey, what do you think? Those are the most powerful words any leader has in their toolkit.
Yeah, and you know what? There's a resource that I have recently become aware of for those organizations that are interested in what people are saying, and that maybe they've had a paper suggestion box. Recognizing now that many people are not working in the same place, there is a service called A Suggestion, and you can find it. I don't shill for these guys. I don't get anything from them, but it is a service. It's called asuggestion.com. If you're interested, take a look at what that is. And it's kind of an online suggestion box, something that enables communication to people in leadership of organizations.
I mean, this whole thing is around culture, right? So the idea is to create a culture where someone can say to their manager, "Hey, you're an idiot, and here's why," and to feel that although maybe nothing's going to change, but to feel that they were heard, and they, the feedback would be, "Okay, I am an idiot, and I appreciate why you think that, but this is why I have to be an idiot." And so,
along with that, Sunjay, I think it's about creating a climate as part of the culture. A climate where people are okay asking questions. Why do we do it that way? Why does it always have to be done that way? And that's really difficult to do for a leader. And when they do it, I think that's when people feel better about giving their input. All right.
Jeff, can I jump on that point? There's a company in Canada, they have this wonderful award that they give out that is a frontline employee peer-nominated award, and it's called the Exalted Order of the Extended Neck. And the award goes to whichever frontline employee asked the most uncomfortable, challenging question to the senior leadership team.
I love that. And I'd love to see if somebody who wins actually said you're an idiot to their boss, Sunjay. All right, let's move on. Next question. Kind of piggybacks on something Mike said, because he is exalted, obviously, today. I'm going to use that word, exalted. I like that. One reason that leaders suck at communication is perception. In study after study, the word trust, right, is mentioned. In one sentence, guys, okay, maybe two, what's your advice on building trust with your people as a leader?
I'll go first. I'll do it in one word. Consistency.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I said the same thing in about 8 words. Do what you say you're going to do.
Well, I'll offer a different slant then. Be vulnerable with your employees.
Now what am I supposed to say? That's exactly where I was going to go. So I'll throw in, and with communication, I think it's listen all the time. Keep your ear to the ground. All right. I'm going to do another poll, but this one's a little different, guys, and I want our viewers to participate. Guys, I want each of you to pick one submission you're about to see as we do the poll and comment on it as we see it. One each only, okay? Ready? So in the chat box, would you, our esteemed guests, enter 1 or 2 words, the most important value a great leader must bring to the table? The most important value a great leader must bring to the table. 1 or 2 words from our audience participants.
Honesty, trust, integrity, vision, accountability, transparency, empathy, diplomacy.
Okay, hold on. We're going to tackle some of these, okay? Guys, if you tackle one, then it's off the table. So who wants to tackle one quickly?
Diplomacy.
Okay.
Diplomacy. Just because you can say it doesn't mean you should.
Love that.
So, I mean, you got to be truthful, but there are so many ways of telling somebody to do something. I once heard somebody describe tact, T-A-C-T, which is, I guess, a synonym of diplomacy. I once heard the definition of tact is the ability to tell someone to go to hell and have them enjoy the trip. So I just think we have to package the words a certain way.
Excellent. Guys, you want to pick another one you heard?
Well, I keep seeing integrity come up. Integrity came up a bunch of times, and that to me it's all about walking the walk, and it's actually one of my top values. If you want to make people work hard, you got to show working hard. If you want people to communicate well, you got to communicate well. If you want people to listen well, you got to listen well. So it's all about walking the walk.
Yeah. Caring, I'm saying caring, humility, authenticity, purpose, respect, empathy, caring.
I'll tackle the one April just wrote in, approachable, because that's a big one for me. I've coached a lot of senior leaders, and some of them, holy smokes, when they talk about their open door policy, you kind of have to remind them that it's not about the open door itself. It's about their personality and being more approachable in their sense of humor. And as leaders, you have to go more than halfway. You can't just say, I'm come talk to me anytime. You have to think about everything from your body language, from the words you use, from your facial expressions, to being vulnerable, to make it easy for insecure employees, inexperienced employees, inarticulate employees to come and approach you with any questions, with any ideas they may have.
Yeah, the one that strikes me, I don't even know why, is humility. And to me, that's about going back to perspective. I think it's being humble enough to know where your roots were, to appreciate people who are in the same position and maybe aspiring leaders. And so it's that humiliation, that vulnerability that you talked about too, Mike. Any others, Richard, that strike you?
Manager should be able to say, how can I help you? Wow, what a simple but powerful question. How can I help you? People are agreeing with, people are agreeing with Sunjay and Mike. Jeff, they don't think much of what you and I said. Yeah,
Obviously not.
Okay, yeah, right. And I'm seeing a lot of
smart audience, right?
Caring. Yeah. Okay, great. Thank
Richard,
you.
I want to jump on the comment you just said about somebody commenting that managers should be able to just ask the question, how can I help you? You know, if you're looking for a dirt simple framework for a conversation to have with your employees, with your direct reports, just try this. 2 dirt simple questions. Number 1, during this time, especially now when we put it in the context of all this craziness going on, number 1 question, hey, what could I start doing that would help support you during this time? And what's one thing I should stop doing that would help you during this crazy time? Yeah. Dirt simple.
And like, if I can piggyback on what Mike's saying there too, another way in terms of improving communication and trust is to actually ask for help or someone's opinion. People love to give their opinion. So to as a framework, as a launch pad to actually start that conversation, hey, looking at this issue, would love to hear your opinion. And it doesn't mean you're going to do what they say, and it doesn't mean anything other than you're getting their opinion. And if you like the idea, you go with it. And even if you hate the idea, you thank them for their input, but their voice is still heard.
Yeah. There's another comment, the last one here says, I had a manager once who couldn't get through a conversation without calling herself the boss. Yeah, words matter.
I have to share, you just reminded me, my first manager ever, my boss, he always spoke of himself as third party. You ever had that? You know, his name was Jamie, and he used to say, Jamie doesn't like what's going on in the organization. It just drive me crazy. I go, is there another Jamie's here? Anyway.
Sounds like a Seinfeld episode.
No, it's Brooklyn Nine-Nine. For any Brooklyn Nine-Nine fans out there, it's Terry on Brooklyn Nine-Nine, the sergeant. He always speaks of himself in the third person.
One of my first landlords used to say, remember, I'm your landlord, with emphasis on the second syllable.
I love it. So that brings me to something just very quickly. We'll consider the lightning round finished. I feel like I'm out of breath. That was well done, guys. We're getting
a couple of other questions too, Jeff.
Go ahead.
No, you had a couple of other questions.
No, of course. Yeah. So I'm going to look at my other screen here because I made some notes, but I wrote, some organizations don't do enough to create cultures of active listening and sharing. You know, workers just keep their heads down and they work instead of sharing their ideas. On the other end of the spectrum are employees who are legitimately afraid of speaking up because they're terrified of their bosses. A Harvard Business Review study suggests that half of all employees, guys, are frightened of voicing their opinions for fear of repercussion. And finally, a more recent study I was reading yesterday uncovered the fact that more than 2/3 of managers are uncomfortable speaking with their subordinates. And one more statistic, 46% of employees leave meetings unsure as to what they are expected to do next. Guys, the question is, why do companies have such a hard time with good communication?
Well, again, I think they don't want to hear the truth. And there's all kinds of examples from history and from business and everything about where people gave the message, don't bring me any bad news, and people didn't bring them bad news, and catastrophe resulted.
I'll piggyback on that and say, I'll piggyback on an earlier comment about the consistency piece. They say the number one reason why small businesses fail isn't because of lack of concept or lack of idea or any of that stuff. It's lack of cash flow. They run out of money. And so I think the parallel here is people don't communicate enough, consistently enough. So they kind of say it once and they just assume the whole organization knows it, but it isn't ingrained. So the idea of repeating it, and this is why mantras or mission statements or huddles, this is the purpose of all of this stuff, is to infiltrate on different levels for different people, because some people need to hear it 100 times before it sinks in. Yeah. And whereas other people, and that's not even fair, they just need to hear it in the right context. And for some people, it's within a huddle. Some people, it's a casual conversation. Other people, it's on a big plaque as they walk in through the halls of the organization. And so by hitting it in multiple different locations and increasing the consistency and the frequency, I think you will have less people be out of the loop.
Look, guys, we've all worked with, if we could add it together, probably hundreds of companies, right, over the long spans of our careers. And I know you'll agree that every company says their number one problem is communication. If you ask the employees, what's the number one problem in the organization? It's communication. And then when you delve deeper, they can't tell you what it is, which is ironic if you think about, because it's communication, right? And so why is that? You know, why can't people put a handle or get a handle on what it is about communication that's bothering them? So it has to start from leadership. This is one thing I think has to start from leadership and kind of work its way down. Whereas I think in many organizations, leadership's just expecting or assuming that communication is just there, right?
Yeah, and again, to add to what Sunjay said, and I totally agree with Sunjay, when you look at organizations that are rocking it, they invest ridiculously heavy in their communication. They take it seriously. They are relentless about it. They put time and dollars behind it because they know it pays off and makes a difference. However, there's more than that. It's more than just investing the time. It's the context, again, of the culture. And some of those things that everybody brought up in the chat before, vulnerability and approachability and building trust. Because you can communicate your butts off, but if you don't have that culture where people feel supported and cared for and trusted, people aren't going to speak up. To add another stat to your stats, Jeff, there's one that I reference often where 83% of employees across a whole range of industries have admitted to not speaking up at work, even though they saw a serious safety or performance issue because they didn't feel they could.
And here's the biggest issue with not speaking up. And don't get me wrong, I know it's an incredibly difficult thing to do, but isn't that what the 2008 financial crisis was? You know, a few people doing a few shoddy mortgages over here, and rather than someone speak up, the protocol was, well, if you guys do it, we'll do it too. And then a few other people saw them doing it, and it just snowballs from there. And so sometimes it's you know, to be the whistleblower, to stand up and go, no, this isn't right. This isn't what I signed up for. This isn't part of the organization or culture that I want. It's really a difficult thing to do. But in the long run, for the health of the organization, you want to create an environment where people can safely do that.
Yeah, and I just want to jump on something my friend Carol Ring said, because I think that's a huge issue too in the chat box, that a lot of it is conflict avoidance. And this is a subtopic of this too, right? Leaders need really good training on how to manage conflict effectively.
Yeah. Richard, any other comments that we should, in the comment box, that we should pay attention to?
Very specific questions, and I would say we're not able to answer all of them. If your name matches with the name that, it will, that you registered with, if there's a specific answer that we can give you, we will contact you individually and give you our perspective.
Love that. Love that. One more question. I think we have more time for about one more, and we do need to be fairly quick, but what is one communication skill or technique that you think our listeners have not heard before, that you'd like to share to make managers unsuck at communication?
Well, they've heard it all before, Jeff, but somebody wisely just said, all of us need to hear things a number of times. One that I would like to emphasize, because it's a point for me, and that is to avoid the temptation to react with communication. If it's something that is emotionally charged, let it get cold. I let it get cold. The next day I can have a much more effective and meaningful response than my initial knee-jerk reaction.
I'm reminded of watching late night infomercials and the ab flexor and the buns of steel and all this stuff. And the reality is they all work. They all work as long as you do it over time and you're consistent with it. So I'm going to agree with Richard. There isn't anything people haven't heard. But what we sometimes forget is if we do it for a long period of time and we're consistent and we're modifying and tweaking the process as we go along, it will work. Problem is people get impatient. They go, well, I tried that. Yeah, but you're trying to undo a problem that's existed of 30 years of apathy, and you tried it for 3 days. So no, it's not going to just break down like that. It took you 30 years to get into that hole. You're not getting out in 3 days. So have a good approach, be consistent, find your advocates and your champions, empower them, and you will infiltrate in a positive way your organization.
I like what Steve said in the chat box. He said, don't react, respond. And I like that. That's great.
Yeah.
I'm going to throw in one. Mike, I'll jump on you there. Sorry for a second. But I think that leaders have to accept that ambiguity is reality. In other words, if we think that just the English language, if you think about it in communication, the English language is any given word has so many meanings depending on context, right? And I keep going back to this. I don't know why, but it's always their perspective, not ours. So I think with communication skills, right now, I think the one suggestion I would give is to accept that it is an ambiguous thing. So when we start typing, in our emails, or we're thumbing, if we're texting, I always ask myself, what's the recipient going to think of what they received? Because it's an ambiguous thing. What happens? We've all heard it. Once you start typing and once you start thumbing, you've lost your body language, you've lost your tone of voice. And so now you're down just to the words we use. And that's becoming more and more prevalent. So be aware that ambiguity is reality. Mike?
I was going to add, just in terms of a technique or an approach you could take, Beryl Health Call Centers does something that they call chat and choose, which are just these casual conversations that are driven by employees, where the managers come, they have coffee, they have some food, but it's all driven by the employees. And so they just make themselves present and available to answer any questions that the employees have.
Love it, guys. Listen, we're running out of time, and I promise that we'd have a huge, beautiful announcement. And so, we've been discussing, no surprise to these other three guys, we've been talking about the fact that a lot of people have been asking for ways to take a deeper dive with the Culture Club, or suggesting that we establish some kind of coaching program. And while we appreciate it, we're all just too busy, I think, to commit to anything so sort of long-term. But we did want to offer everyone a free 45-minute strategy call in which we'll discuss with you any obstacle you're facing in your career or your organization as it relates to anything remotely culture-centered. We'll promise that you'll get two of us on that call. Well, we can't guarantee who those two will be due to obviously our calendars and time challenges. You'll get two Culture Club members to brainstorm your questions. No sales pitches or surprises, just two of us dedicating 45 minutes of our time to you. All you need to do, this is easy, is drop me an email to jeff@jefftobe.com. That's JEFFTOBE.com. Put the word strategy session in the subject line, and we'll find a time that's convenient to you. So email me today, schedule your free 45-minute strategy call. And for some closing remarks, here is our next show's cat herder, Sunjay Nath.
So hold on, Jeff, that whole strategy session thing, you think you should run it by us before just offering it, or, it's
no, I like surprises.
I appreciate that. Speaking of surprises, next time we're trying something new, because basically the four of us have run out of things to say. And so what we're doing is we're actually going to be inviting a guest speaker. Her name is Camille Washington, and her official title is she is the marketing manager and all things brand and culture engagement at FedEx International. So she will be here to answer some questions, and we've roped her into being a guest host. So to hopefully bring some class to this group. And so we're really looking forward to that. That will be in 2 weeks. So every other Wednesday, 2 Wednesdays from now, July 29th. And as well, we're going to do one last little thing is we're going to have a little competition. And by competition, I don't mean we're going to introduce every other Tuesday or every other Thursday, but a competition amongst the people who do come as guests. As you can see here, what we're trying to do is we are trying to create a tribe, a group. So if you know anyone who would benefit from listening to our ramblings and our rantings, we encourage you to do so. Invite people to the next session. And in fact, we're going to offer a little prize. And the prize is if whoever invites the most number of guests to the next call, We will invite them to a 45-minute strategy session where we'll get all 4 of us there, and we'll all send you a copy of our book. So if Jeff can put us on the spot, I will do the same thing too. So we'll get all 4 of us on that call and a copy of everyone's book. And other than that, hopefully we'll see you in 2 weeks. I'll throw it back to Jeff for closing remarks.
Closing remarks are, guys, thanks. I think this was an awesome session. Everyone else, don't forget July 29th, every other Wednesday. And like Sunjay said, bring your friends. Thanks, guys.
We're out. See you every other Wednesday.
See everyone. Thanks for joining us.